Hey friends, it's Martin. I'm in the studio today with 5 tips for working with high hydration doughs. Okay, tip number 1 for working with high hydration doughs. Know your dough. You should know what the percentage of total hydration is that you're working with. So, take the total quantity of liquid and put it over the total quantity of flour, and then you'll get a percentage, right? So if the dough is 70% hydration, it's gonna feel a certain way, and if it's 90% hydration, it's gonna feel pretty sticky, right? So know your dough. Okay, tip number 2 for working with high hydration doughs, and this is pretty basic, but it's super important, and that is just simply fermentation. You need to ferment well. If you have a really wet dough that's quite slack and you don't ferment it well, it will not have as much strength as it should have when you go into the divide, pre-shape, shape, and everything else. So make sure that you're fermenting well. Make sure that your doughs have good temperatures. So if a dough at the end of mix is 72 degrees or 74 degrees and it's a cold time of year, you're gonna wanna do something to make sure that your dough is fermenting well. And that could be moving it to a warmer place, or maybe it's fermenting for longer. So make sure that you're fermenting well. The other thing that's gonna affect the quality of your fermentation is the health of your leaven. So make sure that your cultures are good, make sure that they're happy and healthy as you go into the mix. So fermentation, tip number 2. Tip number 3 for working with high hydration doughs, fold for strength. I'm gonna show you 3 folds which will add strength to your dough during fermentation. Okay, the first fold that I'm gonna show you is what I would call a bowl fold. I dip my hand in some water, and then I start on the outside of the dough, and I lift and press in, and lift and press in. Hand starts to stick, just get a little more water. So up and down, up and down. And basically I'm just circling the bowl until I feel the dough start to come together. And you can kind of see that happening. And now, often at the end, I'll just put it back in the bowl like that. The second type of fold that I want to show you is what we might call a coil fold, or sometimes what I would think of as a tub fold. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to wet my hands, and then I'm going to go in and under the dough and lift up and then sort of flip it away from me. So I go down, up, and then let it fall forwards. See, I'm lifting and then I'm letting it fall forward. I'm going to go in and lift, and I let it stretch a little bit and let it fall forward. Might do one more. And that's it. Okay, the third type of fold that I want to show you is what we'll call a lamination fold. So I've got a little bit of water, and I'm just going to get my work surface wet. You could also spritz it if you wanted to with some water. Then I take my dough, which has been rising here in the bowl. It's pretty soft. So I'm going to work this dough, stretching it. And once I get it sort of spread out a little bit, then I can just go ahead and put it back together by bringing it in like this. A couple of those will really add a lot of strength during the fermentation process. Okay, tip number 4 for working with high hydration doughs. Be gentle when you're shaping. Really use a light hand. I'm going to show you 2 examples of how to do that, and that will help you avoid having these sticky spots and tears, which can be really problematic. So I have these doughs pre-shaped already, and I'm going to set it down seam side up. Okay, so for the batard, what I'm going to do is on a very lightly floured surface, very lightly floured, I'm going to set it down. I degas just a little bit. I'm going to bring the side in And I'm going to bring the other side in. Now, as I'm shaping, I'm making sure that I'm still mobile on this surface. And if I'm not, I can go out to a part of the surface here where I have a little bit of flour, and I can grab just a little bit and bring it back. And now all I'm going to do is just roll it down and just pressing very gently to seal. Very gently to seal. And very gently to seal. Now that can go into a pan, or it could go into a banneton for a final proof and then bake. So there's the batard, and you can see just how gentle I was, right? Okay, set that aside. And then I have another one. And now this surface doesn't really have any flour left on it, so maybe I grab just a tiny bit of flour and just give just a wisp. So let's do a boule. Again, this is a whole wheat dough that's well over 90% hydration. Just judging by the handling of it, I think it could have gone to 100%. Okay, so for the boule, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my way around, folding to the center, folding to the center very gently, right? I'm working on the outside of the dough. I'm not putting the weight of my hand into the loaf. If I do that, this dough is wet enough that it's just going to smear, and immediately I'll have these sort of tacky spots. So I'm staying kind of on the outside, just only using the force that's required to seal the dough in this case. Making my way around. And then it's almost done. I'm going to turn it over. And again, this is a boule. And now I could do one of two things. I could either use my hands, which is my normal way to shape, or I could use one hand, and then in the other I could use a bench knife. Let's use a bench knife. Do you see? I'm going to try and move slowly. Do you see how I'm adding some tension to this? That's all that's required. It's done. If I turn it over, you can see that it's pretty well closed on the bottom. And I'm only touching it just very briefly just to make sure that my hands don't stick. But that's done. So there's a boule and a batard shape. Okay, tip number 5 for working with high hydration doughs, and that is cold fermentation. So after you have bulk fermented, divided, pre-shaped, shaped, and you have your dough that you want to bake in a basket or whatever your proofing vessel is, I really recommend cold fermenting at that point. So a period of 8 to 12 hours in the fridge overnight, covered loosely with a plastic bag or similar. That will allow the dough time to not only develop flavor, which is excellent, it will also improve the quality of the crust, and it will make scoring on day 2 a little bit easier. So after you've shaped, I recommend cold fermenting 8 to 12 hours for those nice crusty sourdoughs, especially if they are high hydration doughs. So that's tip number 5 in the 5 tips for high hydration doughs.